Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 278 of the podcast. And on this episode, I'm talking about the candidates for American League and National League MVP in baseball this season. With the regular season coming to a close, I thought now would be a good time to talk about the MVP races in both the National and American League. Let's start with the National League. It's thought right now to be a two-horse race between Mookie Betts of the Dodgers and Ronald Acuna Jr. of the Braves. For Betts, he's the best leadoff hitter in the game. He's hit 39 home runs and a career high, and he's driven in 100 runs. He's the reason the Dodgers are where they are. I know there's some talk about Freddie Freeman being an MVP candidate as well. I love Freddie Freeman, but what Mookie Betts is doing is phenomenal. He's driven in the most single-season runs a leadoff hitter ever has. The most underrated aspect of Betts' game has always been his defense. In Boston, his outfield defense was overshadowed by the fact that Jackie Bradley Jr. was his teammate. Now with the Dodgers, he's sometimes playing in the infield. We just don't see a guy that good playing defense who also happens to be one of the best offensive players in the game. In the case of Ronald Acuna Jr. for the Braves, he leads the league in a lot of major categories, including plate appearances, runs, hits, stolen bases with 70, and on-base percentage to go along with 40 homers and over 100 runs batted in. The difference for me is Acuna is on an all-time stacked team that also includes Matt Olson, who's hit over 50 home runs this season, and 3 other players on the Braves have hit over 30 home runs. He's, in my opinion, their best player, but it's hard to say that Ronald Acuna Jr. is carrying the Braves to victory day in and day out. It's weird to say this out loud, but the Braves are too good of a baseball team to have a player win most valuable. They're just stacked at every position. Sean Strider is an otherworldly strikeout pitcher. They are stacked at every position. I haven't even mentioned third baseman Austin Riley. The Braves are too good to have somebody who is the MVP of the league. I mean, we're used to MVPs being the carrying force of a team. It's like the Yankees of the 90s. Yes, they had Derek Jeter. Yes, he was one of the best players in all of baseball, but he wasn't winning MVPs because that team was so stacked. Every position was an all-star position, and that's how I feel about the Atlanta Braves right now. How is Ronald Acuna Jr. the MVP of the league, where I don't even know if he's the most valuable player on his own team? So obviously who I think should win the award is Betts. We came into the season with low expectations for the Dodgers, and instead they are still an elite club. In my opinion, it's mostly because of Mookie Betts. Yes, JD Martinez has had a career revival. Freddie Freeman is going to have 60 doubles. Mookie Betts is the cog of the LA Dodgers. They need him to be special if they're going to win the World Series. I don't feel the same way about Ronald Acuna Jr. I believe he's been insanely good. I believe he's having a terrific season. I wouldn't be mad if he wins MVP. He is, of course, worthy of winning the award, but when I think of that word valuable, I think about how valuable Mookie Betts is to the LA Dodgers. They would be lost without him. I think the Braves would not be the same team, but I think they could survive the loss of Ronald Acuna Jr. And maybe that's not a fair way to look at the award. I just think Mookie Betts is more valuable to the Dodgers than Ronald Acuna Jr. is to the Atlanta Braves. Who I think will win the award is Ronald Acuna Jr. And it's hard to argue. Again, 40 homers, 70 stolen bases. He's a clear top candidate for the award. And again, I'm not going to be mad that Ronald Acuna Jr. is going to win the award. In most cases, it goes to the best player. I take the word valuable quite literally when talking about league MVP. You are seeing the value of Mookie Betts. When he is special, so too are the LA Dodgers. He is the key to the Dodgers being one of the best teams in all of baseball, and I don't feel that same way about Ronald Acuna Jr. I think the Braves have an all-time great roster. They are an all-time great team. I'm also just of the opinion that Mookie Betts should have more than one MVP award when it comes down to the end of his career. Like, if he only ends up winning one MVP, I think that's going to end up being a travesty. I believe he is perennially a top 3 player in all of baseball, and in this season, I think there's a real strong case to be made that Mookie Betts was the best player in all of baseball. And I know and I understand the counter argument that Ronald Acuna Jr. is beating him in almost every major offensive category, but use the eye test. The eye test tells you that what Mookie Betts is doing with the Dodgers is unprecedented. Again, he's sometimes playing in the infield and he's playing Gold Glove caliber to go along his Gold Glove defense in the outfield, and I think this is another thing that not enough people are paying attention to. Mookie Betts is a leadoff hitter, and he's the most powerful player on the Dodgers. He's driven in the most runs. He has the most runs batted in a single season for a leadoff hitter. That list includes guys like Ricky Henderson. Alfonso Soriano was a great leadoff hitter. There's only Mookie Betts who has done that. That is astonishing in and of itself. I know we're all harping on Ronald Acuna Jr. joining the 40-70 club, and that's remarkable. That's special. I mean, I'm not big into stolen bases, never have been. I mean, there are very few players I love who were great at stealing bases. I mean, the only guy I really loved that did that was Jacoby Ellsbury. I'm not big into stealing bases. When I pick somebody to be MVP, I think to myself, what would this team be without this player? And I think the Dodgers would be lost without Mookie Betts. I don't think they would be a playoff team. I don't think they would be very good. The Braves, on paper, are stacked. I still believe they could win that division without Ronald Acuna Jr. Maybe that's not a fair way to evaluate it, but that's how I see the word most valuable player. And Mookie Betts' value to the Dodgers is clearly astronomical. Let's talk about the American League race. Now, early on in the season, Shohei Ohtani was running away with the award. He was pitching, he was hitting. It looked like he was going to win it going away. But then all of a sudden, Ohtani couldn't pitch anymore. And without his pitching, his offensive numbers are special, but is it special enough to give him the MVP award? There's some serious question with Ohtani winning the MVP. I think some people are sick and tired of giving MVPs to players on the Angels. The Angels have been bad for a very long time, so I do believe this is a wide open race. I'm not sure that Ohtani is going to win this award. I also think the American League is filled with players who early on in the season we thought were going to be in the MVP chase but have really fallen off. Aaron Judge still has 35 home runs even though he missed significant time, but he's not in the MVP race. The Yankees are not there. He's not having that 62 homer season he had last year. He's been very good, but he's not going to be an MVP finalist. One guy I want to note is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. This is a guy who everybody is down on. His numbers are okay, but he's far from an MVP candidate. He's not even the MVP of his own team this season. That's Bo Bichette. And as a Red Sox fan, I believe a lot of people thought Rafael Devers at the end of the season was going to be an MVP candidate. He had a really good offensive season, but I think his defensive struggles and his lack of batting average have taken him away from being an MVP candidate. I don't know if Rafael Devers is ever going to win MVP. I think he'll always be a perennial all-star, but I think I'm done thinking that he's ever going to be a legitimate MVP candidate. He has ups and downs throughout the season, and those are the kind of things that take you away from being an MVP candidate. And I mentioned this last week, Seattle Mariners outfielder Julio Rodriguez should be a strong candidate for the MVP, but the Mariners might end up missing the playoffs. It's hard to name him MVP if they miss the playoffs. I think he should win MVP if the Mariners ended up winning that division, but that doesn't look like that's going to happen. The Mariners just this weekend got swept by the Texas Rangers, so that removes Julio Rodriguez from winning the award in my mind. I think if the Mariners make the playoffs, he should still be a candidate, but not the winner. And a lot of people are talking about Texas Rangers shortstop Corey Seager, who is currently batting .333 with 32 home runs on the season. I mean, this was a guy who was given an enormous contract last offseason that a lot of people laughed at, and now the Texas Rangers are going to win the AL West with Corey Seager being their best player. There's just nobody in the American League having that historic season that Aaron Judge had last year, and I get it, it was historic, but there's nobody having a 50 home run season who you have to give the award to. Like if Matt Olson was in the American League, he would be the American League MVP. The American League, you can make an argument that all 5 of the best seasons are happening in the National League. I think if there was a pitcher who was having a phenomenal season, they would be in the running for MVP. But Garrett Cole, who might win the American League Cy Young, is on the Yankees, who are not a very good team. For a pitcher to win the MVP, you need to win over 20 games. And the American League is not going to end up having a 20-game winner. And what's weird is some of the best teams in the American League really don't have an MVP candidate. Like the Astros have Yordan Alvarez, who's having a really good season, but he's only played 107 games. He's not going to be an MVP candidate. Alex Bregman has been really good. Jose Altuve has been special at times, but they're not going to be MVP candidates. The same for the Tampa Bay Rays. The Tampa Bay Rays have been good all season long, but they are a great team. They don't have one player who you go, wow, that guy is phenomenal. He should win the MVP. And I can say the exact same thing about the Baltimore Orioles, who have been the Cinderella darlings of the American League East. They have really good players like Adley Rutschman, but he's not an MVP candidate. He's had a good to really good season, but he's not been great. He's not an MVP candidate whatsoever. This is going to be one of those years where the American League MVP is not going to be memorable. It's like asking somebody who won the league MVP in 2006. The answer is Justin Morneau, but absolutely nobody remembers that fact. I'm saying all this, but still at the end of the day, they're probably still going to give the award to Shohei Ohtani. He has 44 home runs on the season. He leads the American League. He is a star player. This is a guy who everybody clearly loves. He hits, he pitches. It just feels weird to give it to a player who plays on a team that is so bad. It's anticlimactic. Like, nobody has been watching Shohei Ohtani play baseball for the last month. And the reason for that is because the Angels are really bad. You watch the Angels early on in the season because they have Mike Trout and they have Shohei Ohtani, but by the end of it, both of those players usually end up missing time. And in this case, Shohei Ohtani hasn't pitched in a while, so you're not following as closely. I get it. You want to give him the MVP because of how great he was early on. But in the second half of the season, let's not act like we were all sitting around waiting for Shohei Ohtani to play baseball, because we weren't. We were all done with the Angels. Last year was just so much more exciting because you knew Aaron Judge was going to win the award, and it was just so great watching him be the best player in all of baseball. Those are the seasons I love to watch, when a guy is just clearly the most dominant player in the game. And here's another crazy stat about Aaron Judge this year. He's missed significant time this year, but is still the fourth in the American League in home runs with 35. That is insane. Only Shohei Ohtani, Luis Robert, and Adolis Garcia have hit more home runs this year in the American League than Aaron Judge. I believe next year, if Aaron Judge is healthy, he's probably going to win this award because of how great of a power hitter he is. It's also wild to look at the league leaders of home runs in the National League. Matt Olson with 53, Pete Alonso Alonso with 45 and Kyle Schwarber with 45, yet none of those three players have any chance of winning National League MVP. Now, in the case of Pete Alonso, it's because the Mets are nowhere near as good as we all thought they were going to be. Kyle Schwarber is hitting below 200, and Matt Olson is playing with Ronald Acuna Jr., and he's been up and down despite the fact that he's had a franchise-leading 53 home runs. I think it would be hilarious if Matt Olson ended up winning MVP. I mean, I think this guy's been really special. I agreed with the Braves when they moved on from Freddie Freeman and gave the money to Matt Olson, and I was proven right. We are just living in a world where hitting 50 homers doesn't make you a legitimate MVP candidate anymore because people care about the all-around player. They care about the player who steals bases, plays really good defense, and I think that's a good thing, but I still believe we're kind of overlooking the fact that this guy hit 53 home runs in a season. I do want to mention a dark horse candidate in the National League. If this team ends up making the playoffs, then this player should be a legitimate candidate, and that's Cody Bellinger of the Chicago Cubs. This is a guy who's won an MVP before with the LA Dodgers. He was barely a 200 hitter in his last few years with the LA Dodgers, and now he is a legitimate superstar again. At least during the second half, Cody Bellinger will be the reason the Chicago Cubs make the playoffs. If they do, he's put them in the wild card hunt. He's been one of the very best players in all of baseball in the second half. Nobody had the Chicago Cubs making the playoffs, and if they do, it will be because of Cody Bellinger. That puts you in the MVP hunt. I believe winning should be a strong factor when it comes to a player winning the MVP award, because how valuable can you really be if you are on a bad baseball team? And again, like I said early on in the podcast, maybe I'm taking the phrase valuable way too literally, but I believe that Cody Bellinger has proven his value to the Chicago Cubs. When he got hot, they got hot as a ball club and have been in the playoff hunt. At the end of the day, I believe Ronald Acuna Jr. will win in the National League and Shohei Ohtani will win in the American League, but I don't necessarily believe that those are the right choices. Now, I'm not against either choice. I just believe strongly in the other candidates, especially when it comes to Mookie Betts with the Dodgers in the National League. I believe he is the reason the Dodgers haven't had that off season we all believed they were going to. I mean, we walked into the season believing the Atlanta Braves were one of the best and deepest teams in all of baseball, and they've proven that. So I think it's kind of weird to give the most valuable player to a player on that team. Now, Mookie Betts isn't playing with the Bad News Bears with his teammates himself, but he's playing with guys like Max Muncy, who isn't a great player. He's a good player. Freddie Freeman is really the only other superstar that Mookie Betts is playing with. JD Martinez was not a superstar last year. He's kind of revived himself, but Mookie Betts is clearly the best player on the Dodgers. And again, coming into this season, the expectations were so low on the Dodgers. It was all about the Padres. Yet the Padres are the team out of the postseason, and the Dodgers once again are winning the division. And I believe the main reason why is because of how special Mookie Betts is as a baseball player. I don't care that he doesn't have 70 stolen bases. I don't care if he doesn't have the other numbers. My eye test tells me he is super valuable to the Dodgers, and they would be lost without him. Ronald Acuna Jr. has had a special season, but he hasn't had the type of season where I go, it would be insane not to give him the award. Like if they didn't give the award last year to Aaron Judge, that would have been insane. I mean, he had an all-time season that we were all paying attention to. Ronald Acuna Jr. has not had that type of season. Nobody cares that much about the 70 stolen bases. Yes, it's cool to be in the 40-40 club, but we don't look back at 40-40 seasons like they're guys winning the Triple Crown. It's not the same thing as that. Stealing a lot of bases bases is a good thing. I get that. I just think it's not something that we all think is super important. And I know the bases are bigger and we care more about stolen bases now. I don't. I think he's had a special season. I wouldn't be mad if Ronald Acuna Jr. wins the MVP. He's a worthy candidate. But I think Mookie Betts is more valuable to the Dodgers than Ronald Acuna Jr. is to the Braves. End of story. That's how I feel about the situation. Now, it's not going to work out in my favor. I know Ronald Acuna Jr. is going to win NL MVP, and I think he's the type of player who's going to win many MVPs throughout his career, and this is a special season, but Mookie Betts is the reason the Dodgers are where they are. I'm really interested to see how that plays out with the voting. Like, is Ronald Acuna Jr. going to be the unanimous MVP in the National League? I don't think so. I think there are a lot of people who agree with me that Mookie Betts is the right choice for the award. I'll end up being wrong, that's okay, but that's how I feel about it. Mookie Betts should win NL MVP, and I don't really have a strong opinion on who should win American League MVP. Like, there are many players. Again, if the Seattle Mariners win that division, give that award to Julio Rodriguez. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please rate, review, and subscribe.